Now that we have a modest understanding of the MVC architecture, and we also feel a little bit more comfortable with the Laravel folder structure, why don't we next move on to how we can connect to a database? I will switch over to a tool called SQL Pro. This is nothing more than a nice GUI for MySQL. If you want to do this from the command line, certainly feel free. All right, I'm going to create a database for our project, and I'm going to give this the same name as the project, Learning Laravel. All right, now we have a database set up. That's all I need to do here right now. The next thing I need to do is tell Laravel about this database. I can do that by opening up my app in my editor, and if I browse to App, Configuration, all the way down to Database, here's where we specify those sorts of things. So keep in mind, a lot of this you can ignore and just accept the defaults. So here we can see when we fetch rows, it's going to be returned as a class. That's very helpful. We are setting our default database connection to MySQL. However, you could use SQL Server, SQLite, you could write your own driver. Laravel is very flexible in that way. Next, we come to our database connections, and we just need to provide our associated details. So the driver is MySQL, our host is localhost, the database name is Learning Laravel, and now I have a username of root and a password of 1234 set up for this project. So believe it or not, we are all set to go. If I come back and we now switch back to our routes file, let's just prove that it does work. I will remove all of this and let's start from scratch. How about when the user requests the home page, we want to grab some record from the database? Well, let's take baby steps here. Let's do it the long way first, and then we will discuss things like migrations and Eloquent. From SQL Pro, I will create a new table, and we will call it users. Give it a username. That will be a varchar, and that can be 50 characters. And we will not allow null. Next, let's do one more, and that'll be a password, once again is varchar, and that'll be 60 characters. Once again, that cannot be null. All right, and that's fine for our first table. Let's give it a username, and our password should always be encrypted, and luckily Laravel can do this for us very easily. But for now, just because we are playing around, I will enter anything. Just remember, never store your passwords in clear text. All right, let's see if our database connection works. We will attempt to grab that row and display it on the screen. As a first step, we can use Laravel's DB class. So we could say DB, the table I am interested in is users, and I want to grab everything from that table. And let's store that as users. Now we will return that from our route. If I run this, sure enough, we get an array that contains our data. If I were to add more, like so, well, now when I refresh, we grab both of those. But what if we want to select just the one that has an ID of 1? Rather than using get, which will return all rows that match your query, instead we are going to find just one that has an ID of 1. Now we will update this to user, and why don't we just die and dump the user. Now notice how I'm using this dd function. This is not included with PHP by default. It's just a little helper function that Laravel provides, which just translates to die var dump user. It's just a little bit of sugar to make that easier since we do that a lot in our projects. Anyhow, if I refresh the page, now we have an object, not an array of objects. So if we want to fetch the username, we could return user username. Now if I reload, we have just that string. So this is helpful. We use this DB facade, we specify the table, we can provide any constraints. For example, we could say the table where the username does not equal Jeffrey Way, something like that, then get all of the results, and let's return that. And once again, update this to users. Now if I reload, it's going to return all rows where the username is not Jeffrey Way. So you can see we have a lot of flexibility here, but actually Laravel includes another component called Eloquent, which makes this even more readable. And we will take a look at that in the next lesson.